Back to the Beginning took place this weekend with a ridiculously stacked lineup. Of course, we had Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne giving their farewells, but we also had Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Slayer, etc. There were a ton of bands. I think in total the concert was like 10 hours long. It was an incredible thing to watch. And in the weeks leading up to the event, Sharon Osbourne said that she had to remove a band from it, first telling Metal Hammer that she had an issue with said band's manager, and then telling Billboard right before the event that the band in question wanted to make a profit and that Back to the Beginning was not the time for that as it was a charity event. And while the band in question has not yet been revealed, we are still waiting from Sharon. She said she was going to say who it was after the show, so hopefully that will come soon. But there has been a ton of speculation online over a million different bands that could be the mystery band. So today I wanted to go over some of the more common ones that I've seen around the internet and look at each one individually and see the likelihood that it's them or maybe it's not them. Let's get into it. To get it out of the way right from the top, I want to start with Wolfgang Van Halen because, of course, he was on the poster, but he did not perform. And there was so much news going on around this event. It really was so hard to keep up with all of it. So very understandable if you missed it a couple of weeks ago. And I'm not even sure if an official statement was made. It was really just a quote from an interview that had made the rounds. Wolfgang Van Halen was doing an interview with Meltdown of WRIF in Detroit, where he explained why he had to drop off of the event. Here's what he said. I unfortunately had to back out because the Crüe tour starts the day after, and I wouldn't be able to pull it off, unfortunately. I'm very excited to watch it, but I unfortunately had to back out. Now, to be fair, the Crüe tour doesn't actually start until July 9th, so a few days in between Back to the Beginning and the start of the Crüe tour. You would think that there would be enough time to make it back in time to start the Crüe tour, but I don't know, who knows? I mean, sometimes these things aren't as easy as they may seem on the surface. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, logistics, things like that. I don't know. But I did see a lot of people online saying things like, I can't believe Crüe takes priority over this. Why would you drop off one of the biggest events of all time? Which, you know, I do understand to some extent, but let's be real. A full-on arena tour around the U.S. with Creed will help him and Mammoth out way more than being a guest musician on that one show would have. So it is certainly a bummer he was not there, but I guess it is understandable. I certainly would have loved to see him jamming with one of the supergroups. That would have been super sick to see. Obviously, he did the Taylor Hawkins shows a couple years ago, and that was great. So yes, would have been great to see him, but obviously Wolfgang has an explanation as to why he was not at Back to the Beginning. So unless he's lying, which I highly doubt that he is probably not the one that was kicked off of Back to the Beginning. Another one that I want to quickly go over is Megadeth, as that theory was actually already dismissed by Kelly Osbourne. And I think that maybe there was so much speculation that it was them because notably they were the only band from the Big Four that was not a part of Back to the Beginning. The other three all performed. And then when it was announced that Back to the Beginning had added more bands and performers, David Ellefson was added, so some thought that maybe Ellefson was added to spite Dave Mustaine, if that's who Sharon was having issues with. But according to Kelly Osbourne, that is not the case. Although for Kelly to say, no, not him and not them or something like that is kind of a weird way to put it, almost as if, you know, the band is synonymous with one person, as Megadeth would be. Megadeth is certainly synonymous with Dave Mustaine. But nope, according to Kelly, it is not Megadeth. But another name that I have seen thrown around a ton is Judas Priest, and I will say that I certainly was quite surprised when Back to the Beginning was announced. I was surprised to not see Judas Priest on the bill, and I would have maybe thought that there was something to all the speculation that they were the band that was kicked off, had Rob Halford not explained why they were not part of it, which he did in an interview a couple of months ago with Metal Hammer, where he said, "We've known this guy, Ozzy Hop. He's like God in Germany for metal. He came in to see me at one of our last shows and he says, would you consider doing something really special and important? I'm putting on the Scorpions for their 60th anniversary in their hometown. Would you work with the band?" And I was just like, done. We've got no plans. It's all good. It all got announced and was a big deal. Scorpions and Priest. And suddenly I get this phone call from Sharon Osbourne. "Robbie, I know you've got this gig with Scorpions, but could you consider coming over to do a thing with Ozzy and the guys? He'd love to see you." Halford then goes on to explain that logistically it really was just not possible to make happen, but that he was gutted that he had to miss it. But you know what? It was easy to miss because Back to the Beginning was such a huge deal and it really still is dominating the news. But that was not the only huge show this past weekend. There was that 60th anniversary Scorpion show with Priest in Germany that was in a stadium. And let's not forget, too, that Oasis played their first show in almost 16 years So a massive weekend for rock and metal. But yes, Judas Priest, Rob Halford invited to take part in Back to the Beginning, but could not do it due to scheduling conflicts. Up next is one that would never have even crossed my mind given the history, and that is Iron Maiden. When Maiden did Ozfest 20 years ago, back in 2005, there was, of course, that now infamous egg incident when Sharon had people in the crowd pelt the band with eggs when they came on stage, and then the power was getting cut during their set, all because Bruce Dickinson had apparently been insulting Ozzy on stage throughout the tour. So with that in mind, I would never have even guessed that they would have even been considered for Back to the Beginning, since Sharon has made her issues with Bruce Dickinson in particular very public. But a lot of people thought that Maiden was in fact the mystery band that was kicked off, and Metal Hammer actually brought this up to Sharon and asked her if it was them. Here's what Sharon said in response to that. "Oh God, no. Ozzy only has respect for the guys in Maiden, and he didn't even know what Bruce was doing. I never told him until the night that it happened when it was the last show, and he just looked at me and goes, 'You're terrible.'" I saw an article online that said Sharon would have invited Maiden had they not had a show in Spain that day, but I can't find the actual source of where she said that, although Maiden was in fact in Spain on July 5th. But regardless if that part is true or not, Sharon herself has confirmed that it was not Iron Maiden who was kicked off of the show. This next one, a lot of people are speculating to be the one that was kicked off of the event, none other than Mötley Crüe, which to me was another band that was very surprising that they were not a part of Back to the Beginning, given the fact that Ozzy took them on their first big tour back in the day. There's, of course, the famous ant snorting story. They also toured together in 2010 on Ozfest, which I believe was also the last year that Ozfest was a touring event. It was just mostly one-offs after that. There's obviously a lot of history between the two bands, and to further fuel the speculation that they were kicked off, Sharon and Nikki Sixx actually had some beef about a year and a half ago or so. The ant story got brought up on the Osbournes podcast, and then there was some debate over whether the story is true or not. Ozzy tried to stop the conversation. He really did not want to talk about it, although he did say that he actually did snort ants. But then Sharon questioned why the thumbnail for the Dirt movie on Netflix had Ozzy on it. Well, not Ozzy himself, but the actor who plays Ozzy in the movie instead of the band, which really is a valid point. It is weird to not have the band on the thumbnail of their own movie. But then she called Nikki Sixx an asshole. Ozzy replied and said that he's not, but he very clearly did not want to have that conversation. Nikki Sixx then put out this tweet, which kind of added fuel to the fire. It was a weird couple of days, but overall, it wasn't really a big deal. Nothing really came of it after this tweet, to my knowledge at least. So the speculation that it is Mötley Crüe who was kicked off of Back to the Beginning makes sense, but on Monday this week, Nikki Sixx actually made a story post where he thanked Ozzy and Sharon for giving Mötley Crüe their big break. Here's what he said on Monday. "Ozzy and Sharon gave us our first real big tour in 1984 on the Shout at the Devil tour. They gave us the opportunity to play in front of Ozzy and actually, in my opinion, broke the band. Congratulations on an amazing career and what a badass send-off. Thank you with love." So it'd be a little bit weird and awkward to make that post if you were actually the one that was kicked off of the show. I guess maybe unless it's an attempt to mask the fact that you were the one that got kicked off. But I don't know. Given that Nikki Sixx made that post, I would say that Mötley is probably not who was kicked off, but you never know. Stranger things have happened, and I guess it certainly could be them. I don't know. But to be honest, if it was in fact them, it is very possible that Mötley would have had to cancel anyways, given Vince's health struggles lately, the band having to postpone their Las Vegas residency, and Vince Neil having to cancel some solo shows. So who knows? Probably not Mötley, but hopefully Sharon will eventually say one way or another. The last one that I want to go over today is Soundgarden. I'll be totally honest, I forgot completely that they were even said to be a part of this thing, but The Guardian did an interview with Sharon a few months back, and she said it there. I don't think they were even on any of the promo for the show. I'm not saying that is the case, but I certainly do not recall seeing them, and I can't find any artwork that has Soundgarden on it. Obviously, it would have been great to see the band. There are plenty of singers already at Back to the Beginning that could have sang for them, since Chris Cornell is obviously no longer with us, and then they could have also maybe covered Into the Void or something, and then Anthrax could have done a different cover. I don't know, but and that's also, if that's the route they went, it could have just been members of Soundgarden, maybe in one of the supergroups or something. I don't know, I'm just guessing on that. But there's really no other evidence that it is Soundgarden other than the fact that they were announced to be a part of it, or at least members of, and then they did not play, but that's about it. To my knowledge, nobody from either party has directly addressed them not appearing at Back to the Beginning, so we can't say for sure, but to me, this feels like the most plausible option. assuming that the artist in question is one that was previously announced to be performing. If it was somebody that was never announced and they were removed before the show was announced back in February, I think it was, then I mean, it really could be just about anyone. Sharon did say that she would reveal who after Back to the Beginning was over. So any day now, hopefully we will know. Again, there's a million plus bands being speculated. I've seen people saying Kiss, which is another good one. It could definitely be them. But I wanted to go over today some of the ones that I see people saying the most. I would love to hear your thoughts on who it could be down below in the comments. But that is all that I got for you for right now. Thank you so much for hanging out. Feel free to drop a like and subscribe below if you feel like it, and I'll see you next time.